So welcome to the first session of the four-part series on the newest PBIS Fidelity Assessment, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, also known as the TFI, another three-word acronym. I am Stephanie Skolasinski, and I am a Technical Assistance Coordinator in the East, so I cover regions CISAs 6 and 7. And on the call, we also have Jennifer Grenke, and she is in the north. So she covers the regions of CISAs 8, 9, and 12. So who's here today? Jennifer and I aren't even in the same room today, which is somewhat awkward when doing a webinar, but that's just the way that we roll. We do live relatively close to each other compared to the states. We are in the northeastern corner of the state. Right now, many of you have already been documenting your attendance. If you cut and paste the link that I have in the chat box, you should be able to get to that attendance roster to document your attendance here on the call. If you're having any trouble, let me know by chatting in the chat box. We are looking for your name, your primary title, your school, and your district. I'll also remind you later in the call. So this is the control panel. Hopefully you all see this on your screen. And I've been talking about this. We want to point out some features. The green microphone is where you can mute yourself by clicking on that, and then you can unmute yourself by clicking on it again. The hand with the second green arrow is where you can click on that to raise your hand if you have a question, or if we have a poll by asking you to raise your hand, please do so. The PowerPoint is in the area called Materials, and if you click on that plus sign just to the left of where it says Materials, you should be able to see the PowerPoint linked in that area. And then the chat box, if you click on the plus next to the chat box, you should be able to see, and Jen is saying there's no materials in there. So I will have to check on that. I did put it in there. Mine says one material, so hopefully other people see that. If you want to chat a question or a comment, we always welcome questions or comments. And again, you can press on the plus sign and open up your chat box. Okay, so Willie is commenting, not sure where the chat and the materials are. If you have a control panel that comes up typically on the right-hand side of your screen, there should be some different wording that looks like at the bottom of what you're seeing on my screen, where it says materials and chat. And you can click on the plus sign to the left and open up that area. And I apologize if you can't see materials. I have a different control panel than you do, and right now Jennifer is saying that she can't see a row for materials. So we apologize. We can send the PowerPoint to you after the webinar. What I do is I send that to all registered participants, because those are the people I have an email for. Any other questions or comments or assistance that we can help you with right now? Okay. So right now, raise your hand. This is a test of your control panel abilities. Raise your hand if you have been involved in taking or completing the TFI, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. Dave, Jamie, Kara, Rebecca, Brian, Allie. Okay, so of the 42 participants, about 6 people on the call right now have completed or somehow been involved in involvement in completing the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. Thank you. So the TFI measures implementation of all 3 tiers of PBIS. Yeah, you can utilize this assessment even if you're not implementing all 3 tiers. It is a roadmap that will help guide you to strong implementation. In addition, you can utilize the TFI throughout the year to progress monitor the areas of improvement you are focusing on. And Jennifer will talk more about this in just a little while. Therefore, the TFI is a more efficient tool for assessing implementation than current Fidelity assessments you might be taking. It can take the place of the benchmarks of quality, or the BOQ, the team implementation checklist, the TIC, the MAT, and the BAT, which we use to measure advanced tiers implementation. It is important to note that some practitioners have found that for the first year of implementing Tier 1, the BOQ provides more specific concrete feedback for action planning than the TFI. You can choose to complete either the BOQ or the TFI in the case of Tier 1. We strongly suggest continuing the use of the self-assessment survey because the self-assessment survey gives you the perception of all staff for your implementation. And then looking at the perception of the staff as a whole on the SAS compared to the perception of the team on the TFI or BOQ can assist with action planning for improvement. The TFI reports are similar to other PBIS Fidelity assessment reports. This is the total score report for the TFI. This specific graph is showing the total score of a school that took the TFI 3 years in a row. Please look at the total score data with caution, as it is a combination of all 3 tiers together. Therefore, if you're not implementing all 3 tiers, your scores, their 0 scores, factor into your total score. You'll want to see improvement of your total score over time, but don't be alarmed if the score is lower than what you're used to seeing on the BOQ. As with the BOQ, you're just measuring that Tier 1, and the TFI is measuring all 3 tiers of implementation. Analyzing the tier level data provides more useful information. This graph shows one school that took the TFI 6 times. This school used the TFI to assess Tier 1 at 6 different points of time, Tier 2 during the last 4 points in time, and Tier 3 during the last 3 points in time. So you can see the progression of each tier over time. Tiers 1 and 2 are comprised of 3 subscales, and Tier 3 has 5 subscales. You can see those on this graph. This example graph shows the subscales of all 3 tiers. We can use the subscales to help us determine which area within a tier we want to focus on for improvement. For example, for Tier 2 on this graph, this school has a strength in the area of interventions and may want to action plan around the evaluation subscale for Tier 2. The TFI, like the BOQ, also provides an item report which lists the items and the score that was given for each item. Jennifer will show you an example of this and how you can use that to action plan and progress monitor in a little bit. So right now she's going to start showing us administration of the TFI after I change presenters to her and unmute her. Jennifer?
Hi. So I just want to be sure that you're seeing the screen that says typical sequence of TFI administration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good, because I have 2 screens and I wanted to make sure you saw the main screen. So Stephanie just talked about the TFI and why you take the TFI, and I want to share about how the TFI is actually administered, which includes the amount of time that's needed to administer the TFI, and also how you complete that TFI walkthrough. There's a tool that actually you can use, and it's really, the walkthrough is a brief interview with staff and students. So first of all, you need to determine when you'll be taking the TFI and which tiers you're going to assess. So the materials that are needed are different at each tier and the staff that attend to that. So this all needs to be determined ahead of time. And the TFI usually takes about 30 to 60 minutes to review at each tier. So this can be done at the same time. So you can do all 3 tiers at the same time, or you can do that separately if you want your different teams to meet. It just depends how your school has that set up. And once you've completed the TFI, then you go in and you enter it into PBIS apps. Now you can do this online right as you're going through the actual TFI, or you can print out the paper copy and do it. It's, again, your preference. And once you enter that into PBIS apps, you will get the results of what you've entered, and then you can determine your action plan. So you can, again, do that right away, or you can think about it, let your staff review the results, and then action plan. And the review usually takes about 20 minutes per tier. So when we think about teaming, we just want to get into a little bit more detail on administering the TFI. So thinking about those teams that you're going to have, one of the first things a school really needs to do is determine how they're going to set up their teams to assess this. So here we have 2 different options for you. You can have representatives of each tier, the administrator and the external coach. They can all meet to complete the entire survey, or you can have each team complete this separately. I had mentioned that earlier. And then you just enter your scores in on PBIS apps. So you can have one person do this, or you can have different staff, whoever you have as your local coordinator, or maybe you have coaches at each tier that would be entering that information in. So I do have a question right now. Teams that have administered this, do you have any suggestions or what worked best for you with the teaming? You can go ahead and raise your hands if you have any comments.
Okay, Allie, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead. Allie?
Yes.
Did you administer the TFI, and do you have how you administer that and what worked for you?
Yes, I didn't realize that my hand was raised. But yes, I did administer it. It was helpful to talk through the process beforehand with the team to make sure that we had all the pieces that we needed.
Okay.
So when you set up your teams, did you do all 3 tiers at one time, or did you have each team do it separately?
We did it separately.
Okay. And did that seem to work for you?
Yes, it was helpful for us to process through what we were doing and focus on each tier.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments? Otherwise, I can move ahead.
Dave Stanley actually has his hand raised, and I have one more person.
Oh, okay.
Dave?
Okay.
Yeah, I went with option 1, where I had a representative, the coach from each tier, and the administrator and myself sat down. Most of my schools are only through tier 2 right now, so we didn't do anything with tier 3. But we just sat down and did tier 1 and tier 2 together, and then from that's when we developed our action plan all in one sitting.
Okay, great.
And Willie also has his hand raised, and I will unmute Willie. Willie?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yep. Have you completed the TFI?
Yes, we have. It was option 2, but I think what we're referring to now is this is a brand new. It'll cover all 3 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I was on the right track. Sorry.
Yep. So
the
TFI will assess. You can do it for all 3 tiers, or like Dave Stanley mentioned, their school had only gone through tier 2, so they just assessed the first 2 tiers. I can't see hands raised, so Steph, if there's anyone else.
Willie, go ahead.
Oh, I was trying to put my hand down.
Oh, okay, go. Thank you. That's it, Jennifer.
Okay. Well, thank you, all three of you, for giving us some input on that. So, like Allie had mentioned, there is some preparation for assessing the TFI. The documentation that you need to have, you should gather that ahead of time. And here's a list of some of that documentation that is needed. These are artifacts that you should already have available to you. And they are things that you will be looking at during the assessment. So during the TFI, you'll actually be looking to make sure you have the evidence to prove that you've completed these items. There's also a walkthrough. That's the Tier 1. It's an interview that you do with staff and students. And it's something real similar to if you've ever had a SET done, the school-wide
Evaluation tool.
evaluation tool. Thank you, I couldn't think of it. And it's just randomly selected staff and students that you'll interview. You walk through the building, you ask them, the staff are asked just a few questions, and then the students as well. And it's usually you try to get about 10% of your staff and at least 10 students. And these interviews take maybe 1 minute at most. So it's a really quick interview that you do with the staff, but it's something that you need ahead of time before you do the TFI or take the assessment. So this is the procedure for administering the TFI. Again, we talked about the time that you have to prep ahead of time, and so that's kind of the before of it. These are some of the things you need to have done. And then during it, you'll be looking at the different artifacts that you've collected. You look at whether things are implemented, not implemented, or partially implemented, and the team members vote on that. And then that's what's recorded, and that's what gets entered on PBIS assessments or PBIS apps. The after part of it really has to do with the action planning. So something that we do recommend is if you have a binder or maybe you have an online binder, something to use so that you can collect all these artifacts and they're always right there at the ready. So when you're going to take the TFI, that you have all these artifacts in one place and you don't have to be digging them out of all these different folders. It's just nice to keep them all together. I think we have a question. I saw there's a comment maybe. I can't see it.
That's okay. Colleen, you have your hand raised. I was just wondering if you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, I was trying to send something and then it disappeared from my screen, but currently we are not implementing Fidelity checks for some of the things within our building. Is that something we should be working towards right now so our data is maybe more focused and more purposeful before we, because I'm kind of looking at the previous slide.
Which slide are you looking at? This.
Well, oops, you don't have to go back. It just talked about. It's talked about previous Fidelity measures. When you talk about.
So you have. Are you calling from Anago?
Yep.
Yeah. So your school has taken like the SAS, the school-wide assessment, and the BOQ. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't specifically go through each of these items, and these are just possible documentation. But yes, any assessments that you've done ahead of time, those system assessments, you'd want those available.
Okay, so that list is not like every single thing. Those are.
No, and actually, what I would recommend is if you go onto the website PBIS apps, and we'll take you there and show you. But if you print out the TFI, there's actually a column that talks about some of the artifacts or evidence, and it gives you suggestions of where those would be found. So we will get to that, and you'll be able to see that, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions before I move on?
No one has their hand raised, and there's no comments right now.
Okay, great. So once you take the TFI, you're going to look at the action planning, and something we really, really need to remember is when we do these assessments, there's a purpose for it, and it's to get this information, which is really good information for us to be able to move forward and action plan with. So you look at these results and you can begin planning. Maybe you'll pick just looking at Tier 1, and then you pick 1 or 2 items. So I'm just going to point here, like it could be this item here, or maybe you're looking at problem behavior definitions. But you're just going to pick 1 or 2 items in each tier or at one tier. And then you're going to go back and monitor those. You can progress monitor those 1, 2, or 3 items that are on there. When you go back, you don't have to enter every single, or you do have to enter every single document or item, but you don't have to assess it. What you'll do is you'll just change the number on the ones that are being monitored. So, oh, I thought we had a little arrow there. So I'll just point, so if this was what you were action planning around, these would be the ones when you'd go back in, you'd use your previous results here and enter that data in, and these 2 might change, so that's where you'd enter the new numbers. So you do have to enter every number, but it's just the ones, these couple that might change that you'll enter that in. So when do we use the TFI? It's recommended that each team evaluates the health of their system. So it's something like the BOQ or the BAT. So you do that 1 time a year. The other times throughout the year you're going to progress monitor. And again, I just kind of talked you through a little bit how you would progress monitor it. And it really depends upon when you take the assessment, when you're going to progress monitor. So if your annual assessment is in fall versus spring, you know, you're going to progress monitor following that annual assessment. So, oh, and this is the slide. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So this is where you look at those scores that have changed. So here they took it in 10-10, and they entered their scores, and here they had these, this was probably one of them that they were progress monitoring, so they went ahead and made a change in the score. So this is our PBIS website, and I can take you to our website to show you we have some information about the TFI on there. So it kind of walks you through kind of what we talked about today and the purpose of the TFI. You can click on here to get the TFI manual, so you could print that out. There's a training deck that you can watch. It's a PowerPoint slide deck, the TFI walkthrough, and then there's also a video that kind of takes you through everything. But right now I'm going to click on PBIS apps so that I can show you right where this is in the actual PBIS assessment site. So if you come in here, really what you could type is on the tiered fidelity. This is, to me, the easiest way to find things on this site, and Stephanie has done the same thing. So you would just go to the school-wide PBIS, and here you can print out this whole document. And here, I'll enlarge this. You can see it's showing you some of the possible data sources, and it'll show you for each specific question and item what sources and where you should be looking for that information.
Jennifer, can I just add that at least when first using the TFI, the training deck that is linked from our site, from the PBIS network site,
I'll take that. Right here.
the TFI training deck is really helpful for more information. Looking at the manual and the training deck can be very helpful. And Dave, if you would care to share a little bit more around that, if that was helpful for you or not, I would be or anybody, I would be interested to know that it gets a little more depth at what they're looking for.
And I just wanted to add that this TFI manual is the exact same thing that I just showed you. It's just a different way to get at it.
So if anyone wants to share on their experience, feel free to raise your hand. The training deck is also through PBIS apps. It's not our training deck from Wisconsin.
Right. Yeah, all of those would take you back to the PBIS apps website.
So if you want to go to back to the PowerPoint, Jen.
Sure. Do you want me to show them again? I just went through this, so I feel like
you could go to the next slide.
Again is, okay.
So before we get into questions and comments, we just wanted to let you know this is the first of a 4-part series. And that's all the content that we have. We just want to answer any questions that you might have. There are at least 6 or 7 people that have already administered the TFI on the call that can also provide information. These are the next sessions. Helpful tips from the field. We have Dave Sandley from West Allis, West Milwaukee will be joining us, and somebody from Crandon, Jennifer.
Rebecca Giroux, yeah, and she's on today as well.
Okay. And then we're going to have an item level discussion. We're going to get more in depth with the items on November 17th and 15th. December 15th, we're going to get more into action planning and progress monitoring. So Dave said he'd be happy to chime in now. I'm going to unmute Dave. I hope. Dave.
Unmuted. Yeah, you asked me about what I looked at to get better understanding. A lot of it was just looking through the manual. I think I went through the deck once or twice, and then just getting out and doing it was probably the biggest help at doing it. So that's probably where I would start. Just go through the manual a couple times, get familiar with the items, and then get to it.
Thank you. So Jennifer, if you can go to the last slide, we are just available, and the people from the field are here too, to answer any questions that you have, any comments that you want to express. Raise your hand or chat them. So Colleen asked, what would we need to be ready to give this in the spring instead of the benchmarks of quality?
So I would recommend, Colleen, that, and I know you have, but you want to be at Fidelity with the BOQ. And I think Becca Giroux can talk to this better, but those that have taken the BOQ and the TFI have said that the BOQ gives you better information if you have not reached Fidelity. Now, Colleen, I believe some of your schools have, so they could move on to the TFI in that case. And I don't know, Rebecca, if you'd like to comment?
I've unmuted Rebecca.
Okay. She may.
Dave, you're also unmuted if you wanted to pipe in. Anyone else, please raise your hand and I'd be happy to unmute you. So just to add to the answer, Colleen, I would say that, you are attending this webinar series, which I think you'll have a solid resources and background after this, and then, I apologize, and then look at the artifacts that you need, that you have, and like Dave said, the most important thing is to actually do it. Rebecca, did you want to?
Colleen, back.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to tell her on our website. So Colleen could go in here and just print off the TFI manual, and I think that will give you some good information looking at what resources and artifacts you'll need.
Mm-hmm. Rebecca, you are unmuted.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had myself muted before. So to the question that Jen asked, as far as comparing the BOQ to the TFI, What I found was the TFI, we're in year 6 now of implementation. I felt the TFI was better because we were farther along in the process, but I did think that the BLQ is a better measure for those that are still in the earlier years, I guess. And the one thing that I really liked about the TFI, and I think this is what the lady from Anigo was trying to ask, is I really liked that we had to have somebody come in and do that walkthrough, because some of the things that I thought we were implementing at Fidelity, once we actually had teachers interviewed, found out that we weren't. So I definitely thought that made the TFI more accurate, because you had to actually get the input and not just take a guess on what you thought. Oh.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
And then I was gonna say my coaches. I have 18 schools that I work with, and my coaches. We did the BOQ for many years, and we're in year 7 or 8 of PBIS. And when we switched to the TFI, my coaches and my teams, I think, made great progress because of that action plan piece and the progress monitoring. I saw great growth and changes for the better last year because we did the TFI in place of the BOQ. But as stated before, I think you have to be at that Fidelity piece with the BOQ first before jumping to the TFI, just because it does have more items in it. TFI is a little bit broader within its items.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
And that's what we've heard, that the specificity of the, I don't even know if I said that right, BOQ is much richer. There is another question. Does the PBIS RTI review team for School of Merit Distinction application count the TFI as a source for Fidelity in schools? Yes, we do. We will take the TFI.
One important thing to keep in mind is, and that's why I showed, one of the reasons I showed the total score, which I think is slide 8, is people were taking the TFI and looking at the total score and saying we don't meet Fidelity. But that total score is tiers 1, 2, and 3 all in one score. And for the school of recognition, we were looking at tier 1. So you want to go to the scale or the tier score and look at tier 1, which tier 1 Fidelity for the TFI is 70%, just like the BOQ. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull this slide up. So if you look at this, I just wanted you to get the idea that they average this. So if you look at this gold line, they'll average it, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But you can see they are at Fidelity at tier 1 and tier 2.
We have another question. Does Wisconsin do a PBIS showcase for schools using the TFI? And I would have to ask for more information regarding the question. So I'm going to unmute you, TJ. Can you tell us more?
Hello?
Hi, is this TJ?
Yeah, this is TJ, and I'm in Ohio.
Okay.
And we use the TFI, and we give out gold, silver, and bronze awards to different schools when they use the TFI. So if they meet all of the tier 1 requirements, I think it's 70 or 80%, they get a bronze medal. And then 1 and 2 would be a silver medal, and all 3 would be a gold medal. And then we invite different schools from around the state to a showcase, and they get to present what they do in their school, and they have booths and everything, and it's just a celebration of what the schools have accomplished over the past year. So I was just wondering, if Wisconsin did any type of statewide celebration for their schools.
We do have a recognition process in Wisconsin, and we are changing it. We rolled that out at the conference, the PBIS Leadership Conference in August. There's information on our website on the recognition process. And we showcase different schools in different ways throughout the state, through our newsletters, and that type of thing. Jennifer, would you like to add anything?
And like we have an annual report that comes out that's shared at the state level, and we also highlight schools that we see that are making strides, making, you know, improving their graduation rates, creating that, closing the gap. So we do some recognition with that as well.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions or comments? Please chat or raise your hand.
So I can't see anything in the chat, but I cannot tell if someone's raised their hand.
Nope, nobody has raised their hand.
Okay, so it's 3:54, so we're pretty much on time here.
Yep. Awesome.
So we will see everybody on October 20th, and we will have some presenters from schools, Dave Stanley and Rebecca Giroux.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.